Yeah, so I mean, this is a great seg onto the business that we just started. So I suppose why do people bother making new food? We have all these, we have so many amazing recipes in the world, and if you ate a different one every day of the week, probably you'd live a very happy life. So why are chefs so intent, and food companies indeed, so intent on creating new things? I suppose there's this. It goes back to that idea of what flavor is and enjoyment, and because it's intimately tied to memory. And so when you get new experiences, it fires, I think, like extra neurons get triggered, and it's sort of somehow more thrilling than these old flavor memories that we have. So those older memories, they may be really comforting, but perhaps they're just a little bit less thrilling. So I suppose that's why chefs try to create new things, and also this idea of exploring and playing with their food and creating these new things. And of course, food is and eating is very playful. Going back to the idea of the ants or the lemongrass or the blubber and the guava, what I'm really interested in is, so we have these products like coffee or chocolate, but actually when you start eating lots of different things around the world, you realize that there are things that taste a bit like chocolate or a bit like coffee. And so I started thinking, I suppose back in the time at the Nordic Food Lab, where actually a colleague of mine, a really great American chef called Jason Ball, his project, whilst I was making this weird funky butter, was trying to make a coffee substitute. And I think he was using cabbage and obviously chicory and dandelion root, are the old traditional methods of doing that. And he ended up using, I want to say something, it was like a weed that we found growing in Christiania, which is this hippie commune out the back of, in the city of Copenhagen. And so we'd found this weed, and he'd started making this sort of coffee substitute out of it. And actually the coffee substitute wasn't that brilliant, but then he made a beer with it, which was very delicious. But this idea of, there are things that share flavor compounds, and why do we have to make this thing called chocolate that we make out of cacao beans? Why can't we make things that taste very much like it, because we know and love that flavor profile, but that aren't made from cacao beans? And so you could do that as an intellectual exercise, just because, well, it's interesting and it's a bit of a challenge. But then when you start looking at global food systems and how a lot of the food that we eat is made, you realize that a lot of our favorite foods, whether it's meat, whether it's my beef burger or my cup of coffee or my chocolate bar made by a multinational chocolate company, there's so much damage, not just to the climate, but also to the people, typically in developing countries that are producing these products for us, and they're treated, very, basically working in enslaved conditions, treated unethically, not paid fairly. So there are lots of really compelling reasons why finding something that tastes a lot like chocolate or a lot like coffee, but isn't made from those ingredients, could actually be a very beneficial thing to pursue.
There've been attempts to make things that taste like chocolate before, haven't there? Why have those? Do you want to tell us about some of those and why those have failed?
Yeah, I mean, with chocolate substitutes, the biggest one has always been carob. So that's I don't know where they're native to, but they grow a lot in Europe, in the Med. So I think actually somebody told me recently that on Ibiza or Sicily, they have, they're almost a sort of pest, because I guess they fall and they rot, and then they smell, and they have to spend a lot of money clearing these carob pods. But anyway, people make a carob chocolate, and you can make carob cake, which tastes a lot like chocolate cake. But if you make a carob chocolate bar, it doesn't actually taste, it's not chocolate. It looks a bit like chocolate and it tastes a bit like chocolate, but your brain knows. And it's like, if you sell that to somebody and say, hey, this is chocolate, and they can sort of see through the magician's trick, then it will be a very underwhelming, unsatisfying culinary gastronomic experience. And that's the worst thing, So I think, a question is about labeling it and the expectations. Like, if you give something to someone and say, I promise you this tastes like chocolate, and it's not quite, then they're going to be very disappointed. If we create things and say, well, look, this isn't chocolate, but it's delicious, and it's a bit like chocolate, then I think you can, consumers will be a little bit more amenable to new tastes and flavors. But with when you look at the current state in what I call the alt universe. So when I say the alt universe, I mean alt protein and alt seafood, and now things like alt chocolate and alt coffee, where the companies that are making them typically are trying to sell them as like-for-like substitutes and saying, make this burger out of our alt protein and you'll never have to eat another beef burger again in your life.